G'day to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. What a cracker of a day it is. A magnificent spring day here in Sydney town. Blue sky, not a cloud to be seen anywhere. I'm down here at Barangaroo, just next to this Crown Casino building, a building that is voted as one of the most beautiful buildings in the world because of its construction, its architecture and its unique style. What I want to do today is continue along the vein that I normally continue along, and that is to present a book summary. A book summary where we can take OPE, other people's experiences, other people's wisdom, other people's knowledge from different times, from different, what am I trying to say? From different disciplines, so that we can join the dots and become a lot more worldly, to increase and improve our perspective on life, and to help create further meaning to this world, which we're all living in parallel, but we've all lived a different past. We're all going to live a different present, a different now. I am here, you're there, doing something different, being somewhere else, and enjoying some other experience, and we're all going to live a different future. But that's what makes life interesting, because we're all different from each other, but we're also different for each other. It's these differences that we have that make us interesting, that make us complementary, that make us supplementary, and creates value in our life and in the life of others. Because if we're all the same, if everything was the same, then life would be extremely boring. But God, in His wisdom, decided, just like He decided with Adam, to create a complementary partner for him in the form of Eve. For each and every one of us, He's made complementary people who are very, very different from who we are, for a purpose, so that we can add to them and they can add to us. Anyway, let's not get carried away with the small talk. What I'd love to do today is take you through a book summary entitled The Undoing Project by an author named Michael Lewis. A really interesting book, a book that goes back in time and summarizes some really important, groundbreaking work by a couple of psychologists who have helped us get to the next level of understanding how the mind works, how people make decisions, and how those decisions in many ways are flawed. And even though we were born or created with a rational soul, the important thing, I guess, to understand is that we're not all that rational as beings, and many of us, in fact all of us, have all of these irrational fears, and the way we decide on things and the way we interpret things is not all that rational at all. It's all based on feeling, it's manipulated, it's based on spin, and we all, I guess, experience different slithers of reality, even though we're experiencing life and we think that everybody's experiencing the same thing at the same time. The fact is, we're all experiencing different realities because we're living very, very different lives from each other. Even if you're an identical twin, even if you're married and attached to the hip to your partner, or attached to the hip with your friends or your work peers, everybody, and I mean everybody, is going to live a different life. That's a truth that we can't deny. So with this book, with this author, what he does is he examines the biases of our decisions and our decision making, and it's based on two very, very influential psychologists, as I mentioned before, based on the works of a psychologist named Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. So these two thought leaders in their fields, these two leaders got together to assess and try and understand how and why people make the decisions that they make in their lives. And what they discovered, as I alluded to before, is that many of the decisions that people make are made based on biases and are skewed in a direction, either positive or negative, that aligns to their belief system, aligns to their worldview. And what we'll do is we'll go through some of these biases and some of this discussion, because as I say, the work that these two psychologists have done has been the foundational work of modern psychology. Because up until the 50s, psychologists were of the belief, at least modern psychologists, I'm not talking about ancient psychologists or ancient thought leaders, but modern psychology was of the opinion that people are rational and we are logical in our decision-making process, and that if you take half a dozen people and present them the same facts, the same situation, that they'll come up with the same decision. But these two authors say that it's nothing near like that. So Amos Tversky kicks off this book summary with an interesting quote where he says, and I love this, I absolutely love this, and the opposite is probably true as well. But he says that if you are a pessimist and a bad thing happens in your life, or a bad thing is experienced along the way, you live it twice. You live it when it happens, and then you live it again and again and again when you ruminate and think about it and use it as part of your decision matrix for further decisions down the track. Which is really interesting, because if you're an optimist and something happens to you, either good or bad, you know, you get to experience it once, but you'll put a positive spin on it, and it won't injure you, it won't imprison you, it won't pain you forever and a day, is what we're trying to suggest here. So I'll just zoom in on that police boat out there just to make it a little bit more interesting. So the bottom line, according to these two authors, is that we have errors in our judgment, and those errors in our judgment come from a number of areas or experiences that we've had in our lives, they are inherited from others, or they are invented or created by ourselves. So the author says that those errors in judgment can come from our childhood, can come from our education, can come from our workplaces, and can come from the relationships that we have with the many people along the way, or they can be imagined, vividly imagined, via media, social media, stories, folk stories, cultural elements, our religion, and other areas of our lives. So the first formal point to come from this book, from this author, from these authors, I should mention, both of them worked hand in glove to come up with this breakthrough study. They say that humans make biased decisions most of the time. So most of the time that we make a decision, or we're making decisions, the authors here suggest that those decisions are based on a bias that we have inherited or created, rightly or wrongly. So we partake in irrational behaviour all the time, but may not realise the amount or the level of irrational behaviour that we're involved with. Because, as we said before, most of the decisions that we make are based on our worldview, our version of reality, which is based on our own life experiences or those of others that we inherit for various reasons. So it impacts in a big way our decisions, and that we make many decisions all the time. We make automatic, subconscious decisions, and we make conscious decisions as well. But all of those decisions, according to the author, are coloured, shaped, are shaded, and are deeply influenced, and are subjective and biased. So these psychologists introduced a number of terms that we use all the time these days in psychology. They introduced the concept of cognitive biases, of personal heuristics. And the word heuristic comes from a Greek word meaning to interpret, to decipher, epimania, which is to basically as I mentioned before, to interpret. It's our version. It's what meaning we attach to things. So our personal heuristics. And a lot of these things happen because we are wired in a particular way. Our human species, our personhood, is wired in a way that makes it easier for us to generalize. It makes it easier for us to be subjective as opposed to objective. And the reason for that is that in our past and in our present, we need to make fast decisions, and we don't have the time nor the luxury to sit down and to think something through over and over again, and to have all the information to enable us to make a perfect decision. So what we need to do is make fast decisions in order to survive, because our forefathers, going back centuries, thousands of years, needed to make fast decisions in order to survive. They needed to be on guard all the time in case they got eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. whenever they found something to eat, they needed to eat it as quickly as possible. Once again, worried that they were going to be attacked or be prey to a marauding animal. They needed to copulate quickly, once again, to ensure the continuation of the species. And we didn't have time to think, as we mentioned before. So the book also talks about these two authors and how they had a great relationship, a great partnership, which was mutual fueling. They had a common purpose and it was driven to success. When they were trying to decide on how they were going to put the names on the cover of the book, they were so, I guess, humble that what they decided to do was to flip a coin. And they flipped the coin, and the author named Amos won the flip of the coin. So based on that flip of the coin and that outcome, the book should have had his name on top. But instead, Amos said, no, I won the toss of the coin and I choose to put your name on top. How cool is that? It's a lovely story, just going to show that these people worked together, and it was a work of love, and it was a breakthrough study that they didn't really care about being recognised and becoming famous. They just wanted to get that message out there and show people that what collaboration can create. So these two psychologists were the two people who gave some categories to the various biases that we have in our decision-making processes. And from those two, it's where modern psychology evolved and became what it is and brought us to where we are here today. So let's talk about a couple of the biases, just so I can finish up. But some of these biases discovered by these two changed the industries and changed the way we think and the way we market, the way we operate, and the way we integrate with each other and interface with each other in advertising, economics, finance. Because what they did was that they were one of the first people to really create a study and to categorize things and to understand how the human mind works and operates. And of course, by understanding how humans make decisions and how they think and how they operate and the biases that they have and the fears, uncertainty and doubts that can be triggered, what these authors were able to do was that they were able to also give fuel, to give tools to marketers and businesses to be able to manipulate and target people in a more effective way, to use reverse psychology to do things, to feed people's confirmation biases, to initiate confirmation biases, and then to lead people along a path that would help them, the marketers, the businesses, make more money out of them. So the sorts of biases that they talked about, as we mentioned before, are biases such as the confirmation bias, where our reticular activating system scours the universe to find evidence to prove that we are right, we don't scour the universe, we don't seek opinion, we don't seek evidence to ever prove us wrong. That's one of the failings of us as human beings. All we want to do is to prove that our point of view, our worldview is supported. And because the world is, and people are habitual in nature, sooner or later you will find evidence to prove your point, regardless of how strong or how weak that evidence is. That's what creates opinion, and that's what cements opinion, and that's why you've got so many people with all of these wacky sort of opinions on social media. All these conspiracy theorists that have a huge audience, because all they have to do is to make a point and then come up with some evidence to support that point. But as we know, you will find evidence to support anything you want. It's not all that hard. But we need to understand is that, there is strong evidence, there is weak evidence, but this is influenced by people's confirmation or tendency to have confirmation biases. The other bias that these authors came up with, which is quite interesting as well, is a bias called the recency bias, where people are most influenced by the thing that happened most recently. So people, at the end of the day, as we know, have short memories. They quickly forget what has happened in the past, and in that way, in the wrong hands, it can be manipulated, because you can be Mr. Nice Guy for a little bit and be able to help create a situation that's going to benefit you at the expense of somebody else. Another bias that these authors talk about is the anchoring bias, where people tend to anchor their decisions or their views based on the first piece of evidence or the first thing that they heard or learned. So once again, the conspiracy theorists are very adept at taking things and shaping them to create fear, uncertainty and doubt, and then to leverage that and to make more of it. One more bias that the authors talked about here is that they came up with the term cognitive dissonance. And that just realises and recognises that there are people who just don't want to think about certain things. And once again, that can be manipulated by people, but it's something to understand and to know that it's happening in the background in most people's lives, and you can play on it if you're a marketeer or somebody wishing to shape a decision. So the bottom line is that we're always continually thinking and making conclusions, both consciously and subconsciously, based on these biases that we have been infected with. And the authors say here that we are very, very subjective in our being, and these biases shape, colour, all the things we see. But the important message, the important call to action from this author and other authors is that we need to be aware of these biases, to be aware of these things in our decision-making process, and to try and step back where possible and to challenge our biases in order to make better decisions that end up delivering more positive first, second and third level consequences to ourselves and to those around us. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club. Time for me to head back in and go back to work. But I had an early start today. I started at 5:30, so I didn't have a chance to deliver my early morning 5am club. But I have snuck away for lunch, and I will deliver this vlog today from this magnificent book, and I hope you find it just as interesting as what I found it. I just love this stuff. But wishing you all the best, and I hope to come to you from a different place, a different location, with a different message of empowerment, where we can take OPE, incorporate it into our lives to help us live, learn, pass it on, and to make many better decisions that are going to help us become better versions of ourselves. Yassas, take care, and bye for now.